Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and I'm so excited for today's show. I was thinking about so many of you out there, new real estate investors who are just starting out, and you get all these big aspirations to do hundreds and hundreds of doors. And you look to do big things, but maybe you should look to the first step. My guest today is a longtime landlord of two doors, two, and she lives in one of them, and she has had one set of tenants for the last 9 years, but her real job is not a landlord. She does not identify as a landlord, which is great. She is an internationally trained potter, creates amazing pieces, and is the best grant writer that I know, and I've written a few myself, but she's better. Here to talk to us about the first step of real estate investing. Welcome to the show, Leanna Carlson. Hi.
Hi, Jen. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, you are so welcome. I'm so glad you're here. No, you're in BC. Tell us where you are in British Columbia.
I'm in Prince George, BC. They call it halfway to the heart, just north of Prince George.
There you go. So right smack dab in the middle of BC, although I've spent a lot of time in Prince George and it feels like you're at the top end of the province, but you're not. You're just in the middle, right? A lot more to go. Bigger than California. So at least
Yeah.
BC is. Okay, so full disclosure for my listener out there, Leanna is my husband's cousin. That's how I know Leanna. I've known her for years and years and years. But her story is so intriguing that I had to bring her on the show, not just because she's related, but because of her story. Okay, Leanna, I gave them the disclosure. They know that you and I
Despite
chat
being related, maybe.
despite being related. Let's jump into this. How on earth? Let's talk about your pottery first. How did you end up as a potter?
That I signed up for a painting course. I was a computer programmer. I decided to take something for fun. So the first thing I took was astronomy because I thought that would be fun. I guess I was a nerd. And then I said I want to take something, creative and artistic. So I signed up for a painting class. Was very disappointed that it was canceled. And they said, "Well, we have pottery." And I went there absolutely tripping over my bottom lip. So sad. I had to take a pottery class and I touched the clay and I was hooked. Every clay memory I had in my life, from when I was a kid in Vancouver and we found a cave on the beach, to grade 6 working with clay, like all those memories came back and I went, "Oh my, I almost missed this." And I told my teacher, like, that night, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. Like,
You
I
told
just
him that night.
I used to tease her and say, when I'm a famous potter, like, I was so cheeky right off the bat.
But you are a famous potter, isn't that?
Yeah, well, I was just a newbie. I was
Okay,
just a
let's
cheeky
go back. Let's
newbie.
go back to one thing. Did you didn't like you didn't like astronomy?
I did love it. I loved astronomy. I'm glad I took it. But it was a university transfer course I was taking in the college in Fort St. John. You could only go so far. So
See,
I was just trying things on at that point.
I gotcha. Okay, so you started as a potter, you got into your first class, you knew you were going to do that for your rest of your life. Tell us what you do now.
I'm a potter. I'm a clay artist. I've had a
Okay.
few labels, but they all go back to clay typically. And I have two doors as a landlord.
Right? And you have your own studio as a clay
Yeah.
artist.
I do have two studios. I have my own studio in my backyard. And I also have a studio that I have 29 members in a lot of classes. And that's just half a kilometer from where I live. So I have my own little world here. Involves a lot of clay.
I love it. I love it. That's amazing. Well, speaking of clay, let's take a tangent here. Tell us how you made Powder King mugs out of Powder King. It was it clay that you found? Like, tell us
Yeah.
about the Powder King mugs.
Jim Salisbury found the clay at the bottom of one of the runs, and they were doing some excavating work there. So he offered if I would like some, and I went, yeah. So it was really fun to drive up the mountain where I've spent a lot of time on in the winter, not so many days in the summer up there, but it was really fun to go up to the middle of the mountain and get the clay off the run. What was really interesting though is I filled up a whole bunch of white kitchen bags with it, and it's really thixotropic. So it was in bags, and you can imagine bags of clay in the back of the car. Well, by the time I drove back to Prince George in 2 hours, it had settled like cornstarch into the back of the car. It was still in the bags, but it had formed around everything in the back of the car, around the edge of the car. It's really kind of amazing clay. It's a little hard to work with, but yeah,
Oh my
that's just
gosh.
one type of clay that does that. It can be very
That's
thixotropic.
what's that word again? Ixotropic?
Thixotropic. So imagine, have you seen the science experiment with cornstarch? Like you can stand on it if it's still, but the minute you jiggle it around, it turns into liquid. There's one where they'll put it on a big speaker with a bass speaker that bounces, and so it'll bounce in the air, but the minute it stops, it gets hard packed. That's what it did in the car. So by the time I got home, it was absolutely hard packed in the back of the car, formed around the edge of the car, formed around the seats. It was kind of amazing.
Oh my gosh.
I
Now,
don't think I told you that story before.
no, I don't think you did either, but I wanted to at least let my listeners know that so Powder King Mountain Resort is a ski resort 2 hours north of Prince George in British Columbia, world famous for its champagne powder snow. And Leanna, basically you raised your kids there, right?
I did. My two big loves in my life of the earth are clay and snow for sure. So
Playing
many
snow.
years as a ski instructor, snowboard instructor, and yeah, with clay on the side. So I feel lucky that I found both those things to live my life in the best way as a human, in my eyes, in my
That is
opinion.
awesome. That is awesome. And then Jim, my husband's brother, went up and bought Powder King, and so the family has been up there now. Geez, 17. How many years now? 18 or 19 years? Like lots of seasons. More seasons than I can count.
Well, the girls are graduating, and she found out she was expecting them 3 weeks after they took over.
So
So
there you
16
go.
years.
So
Yeah.
16 years. There you go. Awesome. Okay, so nothing that we've talked about so far involves real estate, and we're not going to talk about real estate yet. I want to talk about your grant writing. You're one of the most amazing grant writers that I know of, and you have gotten grants and money to go all over the world to learn about your pottery and all these different techniques. Tell us about how your grant writing started.
Well, thanks, Jen. That's a big compliment, but I have to tell you, there's nothing I've ever done that I did by myself. I've just always been surrounded by really good people that have helped me. And I wrote a lot of grants before I got any, and they're a lot of work. So a lot of hours, weeks went into them to think out a plan. And then here's the thing. Excuse me, sorry. Once you have a plan, you do really start on that path because you've envisioned the plan. So whether you get the grant or not, you'll often do the project or at least part of it anyway. So writing a grant is worth your while whether you get it or not because it opens your mind to an opportunity, and you'll often take that opportunity or whatever you can get from it even if you don't have the funding.
Gotcha. You okay?
Yeah, sorry. I've
That's all
been
right.
fine
That's all
all
right.
day until you hit record button, and then I don't know what flew down my throat or something.
All good.
I think I'm good.
I got a great crew. They'll take out your
Oh, thank you. I'm
preparing.
so
All
glad for
good.
that.
All good. So let's there's one story that came out that I was thinking about after you and I had talked about doing this podcast. And it was when you had traveled, I think you were in China, I think, that there was a bowl that was broken. And I
Mm.
remember you telling me about the story of this broken bowl and it traveling. Tell us the story of this broken bowl.
The broken bowl was a piece I made for an exhibition in Nanjing. So it was my first and only actually solo exhibition in China. And because COVID happened right after that. But as I went there, I carried my work there. One was in a big wooden crate on wheels that I got made in a suitcase. I just took it all in the plane and paid the extra baggage. But one of the pieces that I made had a very intricate aquatic theme. Was broken by the time I got there, which is expected. It's not devastating, but the gallery owner was so cool about it. He's like, in his broken English, no problem, give it to me. And the day the exhibition opened, it came back to me, and Mr. Wong had done. Uh, it's the equivalent of kintsugi, but it's a Chinese name, and I can't think of it right now. It starts with a C. Mr. Wong would be so disappointed in me not to remember that. But it was done with brass lines and lacquered together with lacquer from a Chinese tree, and also brass staples, and it was so beautiful. And yeah, and so to me it became even more beautiful. There was parts of it that weren't finished, and a friend of mine in a different city helped me finish it while I was there. We spent our days in this really cool little quiet restaurant painting on the rest of the gold. Actually, there's gold on it. So I wrote a grant around that, the story of the broken bowl, and it and I got that one. I was to return to China and take lessons with Mr. Wong, but COVID happened and I still did have the lessons, but we did it online. And yeah, the story of the broken bowl is just that you can be more beautiful with your scars when that experience happens to you. It doesn't ruin you, it makes you better.
I love it. What an amazing. Is that the only piece that got broken? Was just that one?
There may have been a small fish or so. I don't actually remember. It was a long time ago.
Hmm,
It's kind of part of it. Pottery gets broken all the time. We in the studio, it's just a thing. You're managing so many fragile pieces that you just say goodbye to it and make or replace it.
right,
Yeah.
of course. Well, tell us about your studio. You mentioned you've got memberships in your studio. Tell us about your members. Tell us how it all works.
I'm really excited about my studio right now because I have the most strong base of members and students that I've ever had. So it's really exciting to see their learning curve and how fast it's going. And especially when people cooperate with each other and share what they're learning with each other, it makes them all learn even better and faster. So I teach them, but they're also learning from the internet. They're learning from each other, and I'm also learning from them. So um, it's pretty exciting just to be part of that energy. And I have 7 instructors now, and they're selling their work out of the studio, and it's such a positive, encouraging environment that I just I love it's I've been in a lot of studios and this by far is my favorite. It's
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Now, talking about grants in COVID, have grants to travel come up again? Is that open
I
again?
have not I decided recently I said I'm gonna make a goal. I'll do a 1-year stay-at-home residency. I'm not gonna worry about grants or anything, but I signed up for glaze and clay chemistry courses that I could take online. And I just for the past winter just spent a lot of time on my computer and in my glaze material lab testing glazes. During COVID, I had a couple of business grants, which were really different from the artist grants. One, I found them a lot easier to write, and that might have been from COVID. Um, Two, they were really encouraging because it was a time where I didn't want to spend any money. And of course, the grants did what they were meant to do, encourage me to spend the money, because as you know, a grant is just not money you get and you put in the bank. You're a conduit for it. You write the grant, and the money just basically goes through you somewhere else to use for whatever your goals are. And that they were so important to me because they changed my outlook. They made me think of spending, growing, and I COVID in the end really helped my business grow. And I haven't looked back, and I kind of got into this rhythm of always thinking how to improve things, where during COVID my mindset was just what do I sell?
Right.
Or stand still. But I was very happy that our government kicked in and did those funding opportunities, and it kept money circulating in the community. And as soon as COVID started lifting, everybody wanted to take a pottery class and still do.
That's awesome. Well, hey, just an idea as we're talking about this, because you're the best grant writer I know, because you can read a document and go, what can I do as the conduit? Like you said, as the conduit, what can I do and how can I utilize this money? You sell it really well, which is why you've been so successful. You might consider maybe teaching some of your members about your grant writing. Just saying, think about it, or your
Jen,
instructors.
if they get to that point, I'll absolutely do that. Um, the where my members are at right now, I was just saying this to somebody else. I remember what they're doing. They work so hard to do what they're doing, and a lot of them have other commitments, other jobs, and a family. I know how hard that is for them to do. So my role right now is a support crew. I love it so much
I love
because I
it.
think what could I have used back then? There are many things that artists share, but there's many things that artists don't share. And so I do try to share. I'm very transparent in my studio, because I want to encourage them. When good things happen to them, I feel like good things happen to me.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about another role that you have. Let's talk about you being a landlord. Because nothing that we talked about so far was about you being a landlord. It's clearly your passion is not landlording, and that's great. But let's tell us how this all happened. Tell us the story.
So passive income, I'm related to this group called the Salisburys who are always excited about real estate. And even their dad, I can remember as a young person and either Mike or Jim telling me you should spend 4 hours a week checking out the real estate in your area. Like you should always know what's going on in the real estate. So, but what I thought was the passive income. And at the time where I bought this duplex, that's what it was all about. And this duplex was a dive. It was a foreclosure sale. Nobody wanted it. It had been on the market for a long time. A drug dealer had lived here. So at some point, the hydro lines had been cut and the neighborhood hated it. Cabs wouldn't come here. A taxi wouldn't come to pick me up because it was blacklisted. So coincided with getting a divorce. It wasn't my dream place to move into, but it was a place that I could set up. It has half an acre, which is really nice for an artist, and it had potential for a shop and it's near a bus stop. Oh, I had a good friend that picked me up one day and said, "We need to look for a place for you, and it needs to check these boxes. It needs to have something you can rent. It needs to be close to a bus stop." And it was really good advice. We didn't find anything that day, but I kept all those things in my mind, and this place checked those boxes. And the bus stop was about being easy to rent, uh, a place that's not a high rent, the people likely would use the bus system to go to university or to work.
How cool. And that was 9 years ago, right? Or 10 years ago, I
No,
forget.
no, I've renewed my mortgage twice since I've been here. So it was like 12 or 13 years ago.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. And you've cleaned it up. I've seen your place. It's not a dive at all. And you've got a studio in the backyard there that I know Mike helped you build. Tell
And
us about and
you
me,
also
yeah.
did. No, if I remember correctly, he started it, dropped you off and left. And I was also gone on an artist tour.
Oh yeah, that's right. I do remember. I had to fix it all. That's right, because I'm the fixer of the family. Oh my
You were
goodness.
the builder. You were the general contractor.
I was the one coordinating it all. That sounds familiar. Well, and truth be told, you have worked with us. We have had projects in Prince George, and we have had rentals, renovations. We have done a couple of flips, which Mike and I don't normally do flips, but it made sense at the time. And actually, one
We
of the
learned a lot.
flips. What's that?
We learned a lot from that one.
We learned a ton. What did you learn?
Um,
Don't
what
work
did
with
I
your
learn?
family?
That we shouldn't have done that particular flip. Uh,
Yeah, we shouldn't have done one of them, but that's okay.
I learned a lot. Financially, it was a mistake on our part because the other investment would have done really well. But we got so tied up with that one. And I guess what I learned was it's really hard to find good contractors here. And
Mm-hmm.
it took a while to build our team. That was the big challenging part.
Right.
And we did though. So it was hard when we made the decision not to move forward because we had accomplished that.
Well, we had
But
this great team. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, but in the end, finances aren't always the measure of success because I look back at that and think, well, that's when my daughter was inspired to become a carpenter. And she moved here and stayed here with her husband and now has a baby up the road. So you can't buy that. But that was part of what happened with that project.
I love it. I love it. Well, and it's interesting because one problem in a geographic area like Prince George, you can't find good contractors and good contractors in that area. It's actually very small, rural area. And so folks that are good contractors are usually booked, and they're usually booked far out, and they're very expensive because they are rare to get. So once we got our team established, you're exactly right. That was like a gem. But what is a gem in one location may not be a gem in the exact same way in another location, right? So,
Yeah.
but I'm thankful that we did all that in Prince George and working together, and even the weather, it's so cold in Prince George in the winters.
I was going to say that the
Right?
short building system and the different building codes that Mike was not used to. He'd built in BC before, but not this far north. So the
Right.
codes were different. Yeah.
Very interesting changes, right? Because we know our method on the coast of BC and Paul River. But yeah, going up to Prince George, it was really a different world that we weren't expecting. So yeah, well, tell us, you've got the same set of tenants. So you revived your duplex, you moved in it, revived your duplex. I didn't realize it was blacklisted by the cab companies. That's really funny, actually. I think that's really funny. And then you've got these beautiful tenants. And I remember you telling me about these tenants a while ago saying, oh, they might be looking to buy something, or they might be looking to leave. And then come to find out they're still there. You still
Yeah,
have
it
them.
was yeah, because they have a dog, and for a while he was barking, and I was complaining about the dog barking. And they're the kind of people that just try their best and do their best, and they're just solid people. So for that one thing, it bothered them, and it bothered me to even tell them that because I knew they would take it hard. But we had a second conversation and I said, besides the dog barking, you guys are the perfect tenants. Like, I enjoy having you here so much. We count on each other in a way that if we need something, they're there for me, I'm there for them. But we don't hang out every day, so we don't get tired of each other. Both of our places are very private, but I feel secure because I have these people right next to me. And then when they realized that, it was that dog never barks anymore. They've just trained it really well. They worked with it and the barking just subsided. He barks once in a while now, but it's not anything to bother someone. It just is something that kind of creeped up and maybe they didn't notice. I don't know, but it's all worked out now. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've created a community, which is, for me, it's the key to landlording, is don't just have a rental, create a community. And that's exactly what you've done. And you are actively part of that community because you're living in half the duplex. What do you
That's
say
true, isn't it,
go
Jen?
ahead.
Like, and we were even talking about contractors. It's the same. It's about the people you work with, no matter what project you have. It's always about the people.
What do you say to the new real estate investor who is, looking at the 100 doors that they want to get, and they're, great guns trying to do step 50 of being a real estate investor, but they haven't done step 1. What's your advice to the newbie real estate investor, Leanna?
That's such a good question. I've actually given that some thought. And my thought is it's similar to writing a grant, it's similar to writing a quote. When you write a quote, you put in a buffer for your money. You don't put your quote in and cut it so close that if you make a mistake, you're going to lose money. You also have to put a buffer of time in there because things always take longer than what you expect them to. I think that should also apply to your own life, your personal life too, that you want to keep a buffer in your life. And I remember, especially when I had a family and kids and a job and commitments and responsibilities, sometimes that calendar was so full that if one thing went wrong, it got very stressful because everybody's calendar was so full that something taking a chunk of time out, it made the cards start to fall. So I think the approach for anything like this is really manage your time as well as your money. Make sure you have that blank time on your calendar that you can use to recover if you have an emergency, or to be creative. If you don't have an emergency, you've got that blank time, you can use that time for planning or thinking. I find the most freedom for planning and thinking is when there's nothing else on the plate, that you're just free to just let your mind go. So that's my thought. Don't do anything like that in a stress. And for real estate, that's tough because real estate is such a fast moving, a fast paced business. But that doesn't have to be. Your planning can be all there. And Mike always says it too. You create your opportunity, so when opportunity knocks, you're ready for it. So do your homework, have that all planned out, and then when you have your plan, move forward. Don't do it on a whim.
Right. Leanna, I'm so happy to have you on the show. And the main reason, not only because I love you, but the main reason is because you don't, landlording is not your central focus in your world. And I wanted my listeners to hear this, that it doesn't have to all be about landlording. Landlording can be your side hustle, or it can be just a fraction of your life. But if you manage your time and your money, just like what you said, then it's just sort of blended in. It's not a distraction, if that makes sense.
It's almost a buffer in itself, like the
Yeah.
financial buffer, right? Because to pay the mortgage without that income would be very difficult for an artist. So to have that help to pay the taxes and the mortgage and get some equity in the place, it's a buffer in itself.
Love it.
Too much would be, I am thinking of buying 2 more doors, buying another place at the rental, moving, renting this place out. But I know, as easy as these tenants are, sometimes they are that thing that something comes up and, a hot water tank goes, or an emergency in the place. So now it will be times by 3 next time that I could get a call in the middle of the night, or something come up that will take all my attention when I have something else on my plate. So I'm weighing all that if I want to commit to that.
Yeah. When you are a a small unit landlord, like I would say less than 10 doors, it really magnifies as you get up to those 10 doors. And then after 10, really when you establish your team, when you establish
Mhm.
your team supporting your doors, that's when you can start to delegate more and hire things out more. But I totally agree with you. When you've got 2 doors and you want to add 2 more, you're really going to feel that magnification.
Mhm.
But that's actually a good thing, because it's going to force you to create that team that's so precious. That's good. That's a good
I
thing.
agree. And when you're small, like you say, under 10 doors, you don't have enough emergencies to have the plumber on the quick dial. You have to go out and find one. And it might have been a while before you had to find one. And maybe the one you had before isn't working anymore.
Right.
And yeah, so,
That
but it's
happens.
funny because our conversations, I do relate it back to my studio too, which is like renting shelves instead of doors. But I feel like in my studio, I'm reaching that level that I now have the support crew, that my life is more balanced. When you're doing everything yourself, no matter what business you're in, it's very difficult. Time is a huge resource.
Is that how you do your studio? You rent shelves for people to sell stuff?
No, I rent shelves for them to keep their tools and they can work in the
Oh,
studio. So they have a certain amount of space for their own private stuff, but they can come in whenever they like and work and create work in there.
How fun. What a cool business model. I love that you twisted it to renting shelves. That's very cool. Good for you. Good for you. Hey, Leanna, if a listener wants to see your pottery or learn more about what you're doing in clay artistry, what's the best way for them to find you?
www.carlsonpottery.com.
Carlsonpottery.com. That's excellent.
I
Well,
don't have anything for sale on there at this moment, but I'll actually make my goal to have something on there by the time this airs.
perfect. Perfect. Well, go check that out. Listeners, if you've got a question or you want to see what Leanna's doing and her passion, please check out her pottery. She is just fantastic. So here's your call to action out there. If you're interested in this, look in your local area where you live right now. Look for a small multi-unit, which is 4 units or less. Look for one of those in your area. Run the numbers, see if the cash flow would work. And maybe at today's interest rates, it wouldn't work. You never know. But get your mind into finding something small unit and try out your multifamily calculators, try one closer to home, and try one that is a lot less than 100 doors. So there you go. There's some homework. Leanna, thank you so much for joining me on the show. This has been so much fun talking with you.
Thank you, Jen. It's always fun talking to you.
Yeah, perfect.